Welcome once again. This is Charlie Greenberg, your host and moderator for Digital Business Demos, the series where we provide live business demos that focus on different digital transformation and platform strategies, and in particular, demonstrate different components and products within Software AG's digital business platform. Today's topic, DevOps, is about ensuring the high quality and rapid development for next-generation applications, as well as continuous integration. In just a few moments, we'll be joined by today's presenter, Senior Product Manager Angel Cholchev, who will demo how the right tools can help manage successful DevOps teams. But first, I'd like to point out that today's presentation is brought to you by Software AG, a 48-year-old organization well known for customer-centric innovation. In fact, Software AG is ranked as a leader in many innovative and digital technology categories. We have more than 4,300 employees, $1 billion in annual revenue, and we can cite over 70% of the global 1,000 as customers. And those customers include well over 2 million developers at leading organizations who have adopted Software AG products to innovate solutions cross-industry, cross-private and public sectors, and who rely on Software AG to complete their journeys as digital enterprises by using the end-to-end capabilities of the digital business platform. Please keep in mind that following today's presentation and demo, we will provide a Q&A session. So as usual, please use the WebEx Q&A box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen at any point during the presentation for any questions and comments. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Angel Cholchev.
Hi, Charlie, and all the participants. Thanks for the introduction. Of me and the company and about the topic that we're about to speak of. So in today's presentation, I would like to touch on the DevOps side, but especially about the DevOps side on how do we set up the DevOps for the developers. Namely, how do we set up the machines, how do they work with the version control system, how do they set up tests. This presentation is partly connected with the previous presentation. We'll get back to it at the end because you'll see parts of an old presentation in the demo. So I would like to directly focus on DevOps and what it brings the developers. It directly brings the developers the capability to innovate a lot faster, which means that you can work independently, you can be more sure in the quality of your work, and this at the end with a lot of additional let's say, tooling, scripting might bring your product very fast to production. Now, those things are also applicable in the WebMethods world, and again, here we would like to point out how those can be applied from the developer side. Like, how do you need to set up your development processes, and especially how your developer machines need to be set up. Okay. In this world, again, we'll touch on what has to be installed on every single developer's machine. Also, what kind of licenses do we need to have? Then, how do we set up a test, for example? First, how do we work with the version control system? What is the correct way of doing it? And then, how do we set up also tests? Where do we have to save those tests? And how do we connect those parts with the continuous integration topics that we showed previously? Those continuous integration demos are already recorded. You can find those on YouTube. So we'll get back to those in a while. Okay, so let's focus first on what's the developer DevOps setup. In the Software AG world, we're assuming, and that's our strategy, that the developer workstation has to be a self-sustained machine. This means that a developer has to have present on his machine all the servers that he's developing against. So in our example, we'll be showing how do we develop against the integration server, which means that on every single machine here, on every single development workstation, there is an integration server installed next to the designer, which is our development environment normally. So the idea is that a single developer will be able to have this machine will be his sandbox. He will be able to create tests and automate the test of his assets. And then as he's ready with them, he's about to save those assets in the central version control system, which at some point will gather all the sources from all the developers and will run a continuous integration process through all the sources, which is preventing the integration here at the end of the day. But again, we'll focus on those boxes here, namely what do we need to install on every single machine, what licenses do we need here, how do we work against the version control system. This is something that is very important for your administrators and for your developers. And how do we check in, check out stuff, especially the sources and tests. Okay, so let's move forward. So to set up our DevOps installation, the developers have set up DevOps installation. We need to again install, for this demo, the integration server on the local machines. We need to install the designers on every single machine. So the designer needs to be able to work on the file system with the integration server. So they might be in the same installation directory or might be, let's say, under the namespace of a single user, so that the designer has right access to the integration server folders. And additionally, we need to install, because of the test capabilities, the unit test framework, which is used to be a GCS tool, but it's from 9.12. It's part of the suite, so you can directly install it via the designer. For previous versions of the unit test framework, which was called WM Test Suite, there is a separate version provided on Empower, which you can download and install manually on all your integration servers and designers. So the test suite has two parts. It has a server-side part, which lives in the integration server, and it has a client-side, which is a designer. It's a Eclipse plugin, actually, that has to be installed on top of the designer. Okay, so here I've just put a screenshot of the installer. How do we install those things after version 9.12? And here you can see that under the designer, under services, which is actually the plugins that we need for service development in the integration server, we now have a new checkbox, which is called Unit Test Framework. And under the integration server, actually that's the integration server panel here, as it's opened, we also have here Unit Test Framework support. That's the server side. So that's, again, a very important prerequisite for having DevOps on the local machines. Okay, so how do we set up the configuration? Well, first, unfortunately, we need licenses for every single integration server. Now, those licenses are not production licenses or even test licenses. So speak to your account manager. I'm pretty sure if you already don't have this, then there is a bundle which is for development purposes of the integration server. So every single server has to have a valid license. And then there is an additional license for the unit test framework. Again, if you don't have it, it will be provided by Software AG. Normally it has additional costs, but again, I would not like to touch on the cost here. It's just a capability that we need to have a license, and you need to actually put a physical license on the machine and import it into the designer. Okay, the next normal step that is required for every single development with the designer is to connect the designer to the local integration server. By this, the designer will understand that it has right access and it will work in a local development mode. The next thing is something that we'll probably be removing in the next releases, and that is connecting the unit test framework to the local integration server. So keep in mind that this is a separate connection. This is not part of the standard connection that the designer is doing to the integration server. Probably in the future there will be only one connection. The reason for this separate connection of the unit test framework is that actually the framework is a client by itself. So every time you run tests against the integration server, it opens a separate session with the integration server, which allows you to do things like mocking in the session, which will affect only the session and not, let's say, all the other test sessions which are performed on the server itself. And the last but the vital piece is actually connecting the designer to a version control system. Now, we support a couple of version control systems, normally those that are native to Eclipse, and designer is basically Eclipse. But we prefer working with Git also we have certified our designer with one SVN plugin, because SVN is an older client, there are a lot of implementation for Eclipse clients, of Eclipse SVN clients, but our recommendation, our certification has been done only with Polarion, and there are actually known problems with other SVN clients in Eclipse, so please use the SVN Polarion. The next interesting question is how to version our assets, namely how to organize them in a version control system. And for this purpose, we have already created a sample template project, which is in our Software AG GitHub organization. Our idea with this is to provide some kind of a standard layout for Software AG projects, which can host many things. I'll open actually the example in a while. But our recommendation is really to go to edit those, to clone, as GitHub gives you the ability to clone the repository, then to modify the assets and view your own personal assets. So here under assets, we have one folder, we have a layout, which is for a couple of assets, let's say asset types. And under integration server, we can see two more folders, which are packages and tests. And we even have two test assets with which we organize, we demonstrate also our continuous integration demo is built around those. Okay. So I'd now like to jump to the demo and show you how in practice we can set up this environment. It will cover things like how do we set up the VM test suite, the unit test framework, as we newly said it, how do we connect to a Git repository, which I have already cloned previously, how do we import packages from the Git repository, how do we create new packages, how do we check them into the Git repository, and also how do we work with the VM test suite in order to create tests, to create mocks for tests, and also check those into our template that we just provided. And you'll see how this is beautifully connected with our continuous integration demo. So I'll jump now to the demo. For the demo, I've used my Linux box, but it will be exactly the same if your developers are using Windows machines. We support both operation system up to a very high level. So let's begin with the step that is verifying that the VM test suite is properly set up and you have everything that you need to start writing tests. And actually, as I said, the VM test suite, the unit test framework is something that we install separately, and it needs a separate connection to the integration server. So if we open the preferences here, you see that under Software AG there is a Web Methods Test Suite tab, actually, and there you have two very important panels, which are the ones where you provide the license. So unless you provide the license, then the client will not work correctly against the server. We can check the license. Now I'm using version 9.12 for my demo. And the other is actually providing a connection to the server. So there is already one connection to the server, which is actually this one here in the package navigator, but we need a separate connection because the tests that we're going to create are actually Java packages in the Eclipse workspace. So they're, unlike the packages that we're creating, they're not living on the integration server side, and they will never be deployed on the server itself. They're living somewhere outside. They're living, for example, here in the Eclipse workspace. So here your Eclipse workspace can actually create a session with a server, can then run the tests, and can give you back a report, for example. So here we have specified the connection to a local server. Again, that's the same local server where we create our assets. So you see later, as I'm creating a new implementation, this connection will be used also to test the implementation. So I can also test the connection. Currently, my connection is successfully set up. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you is actually how do we connect to a version control system. And for this demo, I'll use just the built-in Git client here. And I have already pre-set up one repository for me, which is basically a clone of the software AG template directory. So here under my own personal user, I have cloned the software AG project template, simple project layout. And here I can get the URL with which I will clone it locally. I'll just copy it to my own workspace. So what I need to do is just clone the removed Git repository to my own, to have my own personal copy locally on my machine. So this is done by here. So it already picks up from my clipboard the location that I just copied. And I would like to have a local copy of it. Okay, I'll click next. I'll just choose one branch. I don't need anything else. So we'll just create a copy of the branch locally. It will take a while because it retrieves the objects from the internet. That's actually from GitHub. Again, you can take the template, you can copy it in your own internal Git repository or your own internal SVN repository. The only thing that we recommend to use is our template because it's really easily connected also with our continuous integration setup. Okay. It takes a while it retrieves the things from the internet. So the next thing I'll do is actually after I have checked out the things, I can then import the projects. Actually, the IS packages in the test are project Eclipse projects. I can first import them into the local Eclipse workspace, and from then on, I can either directly load them. If they're integration server packages, I can load them into my local integration server. And this is with a click of a button. I don't have to copy anything. Or the tests are something that I can directly start executing. Okay, the cloning is in process. We can see here that we have a setup connection. We also have a working tree. So here, as I click on the assets, I can drill down, for example, click on the IS folder and just import all projects that are existing. So again, it's looking for Eclipse projects. So let's look at this one. We have the example project that I just showed you. So they're called Fibonacci, which is a simple package, integration server package that calculates the Fibonacci numbers. And we have one unit test framework test, which is testing this functionality. Okay, so I'll import both of them. And because those are just Eclipse projects, I can move here. So you can see here that the project that is recognized as an integration server project has this small circle here with a dot inside. This indicates that we can move the projects to the integration server with a click of a button. Here, additionally, our tests are here, so they're in the same flat structure. But yeah, just to show that the tests are actually testing quotes on the server, I can come and present you for the first time the unit test framework. So I'll just execute them, and you see that they are both failing because my implementation is currently not loaded on the server. So the Fibonacci package is not here. I'll come back here. I'll click on the package that I've just checked out, and I'll click Move Project to IS Package. It will take a while, but then my project will be here. So that's really my integration server package. Okay. I can actually come here and redo my tests again. And you see that now both tests, now I'm actually running a test suite. Now both tests, which were straight case and test of exception, they were both successful. Okay. So the next thing I would like to show you is that if I do something with the implementation, for example, I don't know, just remove the part of it. Let's say I'll just remove this one and save it. Then my test will really show that that my implementation is broken, and I cannot work further with this. I need to resolve this before I check it in. So I'm running again the test suite, and I'm seeing that my test case is not running correctly. Okay, then I can go back to my service that I've just changed, and I can use compare elements with, and I'll choose a revision with my head revision. which will eventually show me what my differences against the head revision currently are. And this is with our nice new editor, which is again from 9.10 there. So here I'm seeing that, I have removed here a service call. So this is actually rendering the removed version. This is my walkover version. And here I can revert this change by just clicking a line to right, to left. And this actually transferred, very common to, let's say, Java source code. It transfers the things on the left. So I can now save it. Yes, I would like to save it. And then I can go and verify again that, the change that I did, the bad change that I did, is actually was actually reverted, and now my tests will be green again. Okay, that's great. One more capability of the test suite that I would like to show you is the mocking capabilities. So very often, as we're writing logic in the integration server, we're referring to external resources. So it's called integration server because it has a lot of adapters, a lot of services which are calling external resources, backend system, legacy systems, mainframes. And of course, if we have custom logic like mapping or something similar, we very often would like to limit those external systems because we are testing the things on one system. Then we are moving our logic on another system, and it will be tested there. But again, if we just want to make sure that our logic is there and is functioning, we can use the mocking capabilities, which will eventually, let's say, just eliminate the external dependencies, at least for our test session, and they will enable, our full logic to be tested in isolation. So how are those mocks working? They're working only for the test session. I already explained to you that here, actually, the unit test framework is a client, and this client, it connects to the server, it establishes a session. So in this session, we can actually choose a service, and here you can see that I'm actually mocking a public service. So you can mock every single service in the integration server, and you can define hard-coded values that the mocking service will return. Okay, so here, this means that we'll return only value 5. Unfortunately, we don't have conditional mocking, which is, again, common in the Java world. So if you want to do, let's say, more complex mockings, you probably have to work around this with more mocking capabilities. So what I can do here is actually come and enable the mocking, because for my simple test case, they were just, let's say, disabled for now. And I'll just like to show that the mocking actually works, and it will break my test because I'm actually mocking something that is very basic for the integration server, which is the subtract integers service from the public packages. So this was failing. Again, now I can go and again return. I can compare to the head revision just to see now my tests, they are also versioned. I can see that, for example, here on the head revision, again, the test suite is just an XML, has an XML representation. The screen that we saw is actually just editor of the XML. I can come here again, just revert changes. I'll come here, I'll see that actually if I reload it, that, the editor already knows that the mock is being disabled. I can run it again. And with this, I'll make sure that the tests are running again flawlessly. Okay, so far so good. We saw how we connect to the version control system. We saw how we check out packages and tests. Now we're about to create new packages and new tests and version them at the end of the day in the version control system. And we're also about to see how this connects to the continuous integration, namely, what happens when we check in those tests? How are they automatically picked up by Jenkins, for example, and run? Okay, so for this reason, I'll actually go here and I'll again create something, a very simple service, which is called package that will contain one service that will probably divide integers, something very simple. So I'll just create a new package, enterprise service bus package. I'll call it simple met. Okay, I'll create it here. Okay, for example, Met, I probably reserved the name for a package before. Then I'll create again a folder inside just to have proper namespace. Great. So here I have already prepared one implementation, which is fairly simple. It just divides maps. So this is just because I copied an already existing implementation. That's the walking warning. So what it does is actually just calling a public service again. I can just see that it's running. Again, I'm dividing 1 and 1. The output will be 1. And if I, for example, do something like division by 0, it's supposed to just throw an exception. Great. Now I've created my logic. Now I'm also about to create a test. And here the test will be called just in a standard Java project. So I'll name my project simple math test 1, for example. Great. And here I need to add additional libraries for the unit test framework of the integration server to work. Again, it's a client library. It has to connect to the integration server, and it has lots of dependencies. So I'll click on Add Library, and here you'll see the WM test suite libraries. So add some of them, and actually, I would like all of those checks to be checked out. This will add a lot of dependencies which are important for my test execution. So I'll just click on Finish. Okay. Yes, I would like to open my Java perspective. Now, if we come to Package Explorer, we have internally something like, let's say, best practices, or let's say a place where we'll put the folders and the tests. And this is under the resource folder. You can build a similar structure, but the important thing for us for the continuous integration, for example, is to put the tests in the resource folder under a setup folder. So the tests are eventually XMLs, as you can see here. This is called Fibonacci text.xml. I would like to create a similar structure here that holds at least the resources in the setup folder. So I'd like to create a new folder, a general folder, and it will be under, let's say, resources, and then setup. Okay, I'd like to finish it. And then under resources, I'll again create, just to make sure that the name is correct. Okay. That's the name. I'll create additional folder called just data, because it needs to reference a couple of files for the inputs and the outputs. Okay. Now I'd like to move to the actual creation of the test, and I'll come here and just search for test. And you'll see here under Software AG, you have a new folder called Web Methods Test Suite, and then we have a wizard which is for creation of Web Methods Test Suite. Again, it will create just the test suite in an XML file, and this XML file will reference, let's say, all the inputs and outputs, and will contain all the metadata about the services that we would like to test. Okay, so let's click on Finish. This is the main editor of the test suite. So be aware that this is a suite, it's not a test itself, so we need to add the tests one by one. So for example, I'll come again here and create something called straight test. Okay, what I also need is a service to be testing. So here, actually disconnect this here will now search for the services in the integration server. It uses a separate connection from the one where we created the service. So I would like to refresh those one, and you'll see here that I can now pick my diff-int service from my new package, simple mat1. Okay, I'll do it. And here I would like to define inputs that I'll give to the service, and also outputs that I'll assert as the service returns outputs. So here, I'll notice here this directory. You'll see in a second why this is important. Okay, so in the input, that's actually editor of the service input. I can give, I can specify inputs of the service. But again, now the inputs are being saved on the file system as XML data, which is eventually the pipeline data. So you can also prepare your test inputs and outputs assertions by using the, let's say, the standard save pipe procedures in the integration server. So what I'll do here is just click on Save Data. Then I'll point to just the folder that I just saved. And I'll say that this is, for example, input test1.xml. So this will be my new file. I'll just save it. I'll just then click OK. You can see here that the paths to this file are now relative. So when I check in and check out those things, when those are being checked out on the remote servers, the inputs and outputs will be resolved because we're using relative locations. Okay, I'll basically do the same for outputs, and here I'm certain that you know, we'll just dividing one by one, we'll bring one. I'm saving the outputs. Again, I'm pointing to the same directory, the simple math test resources, and I'll call this one this time output test1.xml. Okay, I'm saving this one, I'm saving it, and I'm seeing that I have now a test suite containing one single test, and I can come here and actually run the test to figure out that currently it's green. Okay. What I can also do is I can test for exceptions. Okay. I would like to ask, for example, a new test, and this will be exception test. And here I'll basically test the same service. For input, I'll give again 1, but this time I'll divide by 0, which should cause an exception. Okay, just so I get in the wrong place. So I'll now save the inputs. Again, I'll select the data folder, and this will be, let's say, output test2.xml. Sorry, input. I'll click on OK. It's again saved. Then for output, I would not like to assert an output pipeline with a file. I would like to just point that, you know, this input has to bring an exception. So yes, we're giving 0, divide by 0, and it should bring an exception out. Okay, I can now run my exception test. I can come here and run the test. And yes, I can see that, you know, my exception test is running normally. So if I want to run the whole test suite, I have to come here to the suite file and just click on it and run the test. And this will eventually run my 2 tests with the same time. So I'm running the whole suite. Okay, now we've created a new implementation, fairly basic one, and then we are testing it with 1 positive and 1 negative case. Okay, the next thing that we would like to do is actually take those 2 implementations and version them in my template. So that, for example, my continuous integration server, which comes after the deployment, and which also has the codes of my colleagues, can run and execute all the tests, deploy all the new packages, and run all the tests that we're executing. Okay, so what I have to do here, just to version my new package, is to come here and create a local service development project, which means that I'll be sharing this with my colleagues via version control system. Okay, now for this, the first step is that I have to choose with which repository to share this project. So I'm using the Git repository that I defined previously. Okay, and remember I told you this in this layout, in this template, we have a special place where the IS packages have to be saved. So now I'll just click on it, and now define. I'll go and navigate to the place where the packages have to be defined. Okay. So I'll click yes here. Great, and then I'll click finish. What will happen right now is you see that this project is now being added to the version control system. That's not currently being checked in, but the metadata is being, let's say, used by Git right now, so it's also being controlled by Git. Okay. So we're seeing here things. What we have to do right now to share this with our colleagues is just a standard Git procedures. Now those things, if you're not familiar with Git, will be new to you. We have to add it to an index that's proprietary for Git, and then we'll have to come and commit it and push it to upstream. So here we can add some kind of a message. So for example, first implementation of a package. And then if I use commit and push, it will commit to the local Git repository, and it will also commit it to GitHub. It will push it to the remote GitHub. Okay, so let's do this one. It will take a while because it's pushing it to the master repository. Okay, I can go now on Git, for example, and just check that my package is already checked in. So it's simple mat1, that's just the message that we just gave. Okay, I'm going to perform the same thing also for my tests, and then I'm going to double check that it's being checked in. So here, that's fairly standard to Eclipse. I can come just and share projects. That's again fairly standard. What I have to do again is specify the correct place for the tests where they have to be versioned. So here under test, I'm using this one. So the simple mat test one will be here. Again, I have to perform the same steps which are Git related. First, I have to add the project to the index, which makes the local repository follow it, and then I have to come and commit it and push it to upstream. Again, then we're choosing commit and push, and this will make it directly available in my GitHub repository. Again, you don't have to use GitHub. The same will apply with your internal Git or SVN if you're using one. Again, so here under tests, we can see that we have the new test is imported. So what I additionally would like to show you is here our continuous integration setup. And our continuous integration setup is directly currently checking out my Git repository where my projects are running, and it's running all the tests that I have currently defined. So you can see here in the timeline, the last code that I made had only 2 tests, and this is actually was testing Fibonacci, and it was calling its tests. And now what I'll do is actually, as I've checked in those new packages and the new logic around them, I will trigger the build again, and it will also directly check out the new packages and the new tests. It will deploy the new packages, and it will run the new test here. So this part here, the whole continuous integration setup, is a reference to a previous demo which we did on May the 10th. You can find it on our YouTube page, on our YouTube channel on Software AG. Just search for continuous integration with web methods, and this will be the first one that will pop up in YouTube. So it's freely available. It's around an hour, and it comes with all nice examples around GitHub on how you check out things, how you version, how do you set up all the scripts there on your test machines, and so on. So I'll have to refresh the page after this one is finished. Okay, just to see that we have here new tests which are being executed, and I can now jump, for example, on my test server, which is again a local server, but it's different from the server where I develop these things, and I can see that my new package is directly deployed there, and it's being tested against this test server. Okay, with this, I think I'm concluding my DevOps setup. Again, I wanted to touch base on things on how do we work, how do we make the developer setup. So the important things for me was, how to connect to, how to use the unit test framework, how to connect your Eclipse environment, the unit test framework, and then how do you do the check-in, check-out operations, and what is the best strategy around making sure that your quality is good all the time. By having this in place, you at least ensure that every single, the codes that are being checked in, that are being promoted to other environments, that they're having a decent quality. That's of course related to a lot of process in your organization, but I think this is one of the first milestones that have to be achieved in order to have quality web methods deployments. Okay. So again, I would like to reference to the continuous integration with web methods demo that I've done previously this year on May the 10th. Just search for this title in YouTube and you'll find the demo, you'll see it. It's about an hour. Okay, so with this, I think we can jump to the Q&A sessions, and then I would like to turn over to my colleague Charlie, who will present the next innovation tour sessions.
Thank you very much, Angel. And before we go to Q&A, I am going to talk about that. By the way, we still have time to accept questions or comments through the Q&A WebEx box, so please do not hesitate to do so. As you can tell from the slide, it's going to be a little tight getting to Chicago tomorrow if you haven't already planned to do so, but we encourage you to join us for the Innovation Tour in Washington, D.C. And just to give you a general idea, these Innovation Tours have been providing a fertile ground for what we call ideas networks, where business and technology executives share inspiration with recognized partner companies and respected experts. For example, in the past we've had Steve Wozniak presenting and interacting with attendees, so please take note of the time and the fact that it's in Washington, D.C. in a little over a month. And let's go to Q&A. There are some questions. I'll start with this one. Is the central development environment still supported?
Yes, it's still supported, but unfortunately, it's not designed to work with version control system. And Software AG is not investing in the central dev environment anymore. So our recommendation is to switch to this method that we just described, which is having every single developer, shooting every single developer with his, all developer sandbox where he has the server and where he has the ability to create the assets and version them. Our new way of deploying is via repository. So that's actually what is there behind the scenes, behind the Jenkins. So that's what is actually, we have a build with assets that are being versioned in the version control system and those are being deployed to the environments further on.
I think you may have implicitly answered this during the demo toward the end, but can the central development environment also be connected to, and here comes the acronym GIT, SVN?
No, that's again about the central development environment, which I just said that we're not investing heavily in. Yes, it might be connected, but let's say this connection is not very user-friendly. So if you still want to use your central development environment, but let's say deploy in the new way and have continuous integration and all those nice things, you need to have somebody that will actually go to the server and perform those version control system operations from there, versus Git, versus SVN, or any other version control system of choice. But this is not the way the modern developers would like to work. So the question is, you can, but it's a pain. It's painful, and that's why we're de-investing from the central dev environment.
All right, thanks for that.
Okay, next question, Charlie.
Yes, for clarification, can each designer workstation, or does each designer workstation require both an integration server and unit test framework license?
Yeah. Again, those licenses are of course different from the production licenses, and those are different types of licenses, but yet they need to be licensed.
Okay. The questioner asks, where can I find a list of web methods certified VCS systems?
Well, I'll say currently we're testing heavily with SVN and with Git. So you saw the demo with Git, it works flawlessly. I have also done integrations with relational roles, I guess, a system from IBM. It will for sure work with CVS. Like clear case, we need to test this one. I'm pretty sure it will work. The only place where we found problems is with a couple of SVN clients in Eclipse. All other systems that we currently tried worked perfectly.
Okay. And is TFS certified?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Moving along, and by the way, questioning attendees, if we look like we're going to get too deep into the weeds here, we're going to reserve the right and the privilege to contact you and better answer the question, just in case it becomes very environment specific. All righty. GitHub VCS access requires internet access. Which is preferred VCS to use with webmethods DevOps? Which is internal with an expertise or enterprise with just intranet access? Is that too complex?
No. I think it's a fair question. Like, I've used GitHub in my demo just because it's extremely easy to set up, and that's also the sample that is out there for our development community. But as I mentioned a couple of times in my demo, you can take the template from GitHub, which is freely available, and then import it into your own version control system of choice, and then you can work with the version control system in your intranet without any problems. It's just our example also with GitHub. Again, it's easier to set up, and it's something that you can directly grasp after the demo.
Can we load saved pipelines into the test suite?
Yeah, that's something that you can do. So saved pipelines, again, either saved with a development tool that you have. There are a couple of open source tools for it, like VM pipeline capture, I guess, or by using just the standard capability of the integration server, where you can just, let's say, save the inputs and the outputs of a service. You can take those files and you can feed them into the unit test framework, and that's how, you will prepare easily your test environment, your test cases.
All right, let's do just a few more. Can we load, we did that one, thank you. Let me ask you, can Command Central be leveraged to maintain the developers' workstations?
Yes, so a couple of customers had, let's say, a challenge to keep all their development workstation in sync in terms of product installations, in sync in terms of fixes that are applied on the systems. So they were, for example, connecting all those development workstation to a central development SVN, Command Central, sorry. And this Command Central could easily align their configurations, their fix levels, and could also show if there are differences in the installations. For example, if on one machine we have more things installed than on the others. So that's, again, our recommendation and a very valid use case of Command Central.
All right, thank you. Angel, would you move to the last slide? I just want to point out some of the upcoming digital business demos presentations, including next week. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the ability to use embedded machine learning to combat fraud. We're going to be talking about what we call dynamic apps, and also we want to point your attention at least up to October 4th, when we're going to be talking about integrated process mining with ARIS PPM and ARIS Aware, a different topic for us. I want to thank again Angel. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts, or could you review as well what type of tools that specifically webmethods customers might be looking to use to successfully mount DevOps?
Well, DevOps is all about automation and about the developers, empowering the developers to, let's say, innovate more quickly and to deploy things much faster production. So we're trying to fit our tools, or to enable our tools to fit the modern DevOps strategies by making them, let's say, more configurable, by making them open APIs to the world, so that, for example, they can easily create a lot of tests, they can run tests in different environments, they can reconfigure and create new environments, for example, Command Central. So back to the question, to the roots of the question, I think the tools which will make the DevOps suite for web methods are Command Central, because it's all around the infrastructure. So with Command Central, we can easily scale out the infrastructure. We can create a lot of new environments. We can migrate environments. We can easily automate a lot of the things that are on the infrastructure side. And with, let's say, currently with the deployer, which is also going to move into Command Central in the near future, with the deployer and Jenkins, Chef, Puppet, with those things, we can automate also the deployment of the code and the testing of the code. So you need the deployer, scripting around the deployer. A lot of the scripts that we've put there on GitHub are helping with this. There are a lot of good examples. And the VM Test Suite, which is actually a wrapper of JUnit, but it's specifically designed for our full services. So, for example, I saw that there is a question about JUnit and Test Suite, because Test Suite, looks the same, has the same reports, it looks the same also in Jenkins. Yes, but it does much more in the context of web methods. It's actually wrapping and it's modifying JUnit to be able to adequately test for all services. So, yeah, by using those tools that I just mentioned, I think your development organization can really leverage and, let's say, automate a lot of the things, and the deployment of a new version of the software of your own assets will not be that painful as before, and it will be much faster, I would say. Hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much. Thanks again to Angel Chochev for joining us today and giving us a great perspective on DevOps from a digital business platform viewpoint. Please join us again next week. As I mentioned, we'll be talking about and demonstrating how predictive analytics are using embedded machine learning. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day.